Hi, this is Chris Haller with Konveio. In this video, I want to show you how to set up your Konveio site. We're going to go through a couple of the different options on how to set it up. So we're going to look at how to create pages within Konveio. As part of that, we'll also be looking at how to set up forms. And then obviously we'll go into the document functionality and how to set up interactive documents and collect feedback on them. So let's jump to a tab where I have a new site open. So Konveio will already have at this point mailed you an onboarding email that has the login information for your account. Go in, log in, change your password, and then everything you need to set up your site you can access from the dashboard link on the top. So the dashboard features the three main content types that we have. So we have the overview pages, documents, and forms available here that we'll go through. And then we also have a settings tab where you can change the main settings of the site, and then a users tab where you can manage and add users. So let's start with the settings tab. In here you'll find the first couple of items are related to the overall look and feel of the site, change the name, that call out, and the logo. Below that are a couple of options to change the default look and feel of the homepage. So this is what you see on the homepage right here. So you can kind of change those elements around. This is again if you keep the default homepage. In some use cases you can kind of switch it to a document, and we'll show you where to do that in a second here. And so you can kind of change and modify what the homepage looks like and how it functions. You have a couple of comment settings in here that we'll come back to in a little bit. And then we also have an advanced tab down here that allows you to make some more detailed kind of changes. This is where you would change it to the homepage to a different URL from the one that you have. So for example, we'll come back to this, but this could be an overview page you're creating, in which case you would just type in the title of that. In here you can enable the contact form, add your email address, change what the footer down here looks like, change this to the site, the time zone to your time zone, and also add a Google Analytics ID if you want to track user traffic using your own Google Analytics. The next step you probably want to take a look at is here the users tab. So your plan comes with, if it's Konveio Sites, up to 10 user accounts. So that's admins and managers. We really have two user roles that you can assign to users. So that is administrator and manager. So we'll just switch this one to manager. I should say administrators have access to everything on the site. They can change all content. They can change and have the settings and have access to the settings tab. So you want to keep the amount of people that are administrators to a minimum, and set everybody else on your team up with manager accounts. In that case, they're able to manage their own documents, overviews, and forms, but can't mess up anybody else's work. And they also don't have access to the settings tab, which makes sure that nobody changes the core settings that affect everybody on the site, and keep access to that limited. Moving on and moving forward here, the first thing really we're going to look at building out new overview pages. Overview pages are, as you see in here, very sort of section by section pages that you can mix and modify and easily kind of build out a page that's very visual and also has features different types of content. Sometimes that might be a block grid, sometimes that might be stretched all the way across. It could even include forms and other elements. And so you can either start building this from scratch if you have a specific idea, or a new feature that we just introduced is you can add a template. In this case, you could start with the digital workshop template, which you can also use for other types of uses. But now that we look at this, it's already pre-populated, so it has a large sort of call out in the top. It has a grid that features different poster boards, but that could be used for draft reviews or sharing other information like meeting notes or meetings. And so beyond that, you can add separators and add additional information below that and kind of keep building out this template. And so let's take a quick look at how that works. So as you remember I mentioned this is all sort of built section by section. So you can kind of go in here. You see that the first section that was sort of the big call out, has a title, has some text underneath. You can kind of obviously go in and change all these. There's a WYSIWYG editor in here that functions very much like Microsoft Word. So we would encourage you to use this to style your text and make all the formatting changes that is necessary. If you bring over and copy and paste text from Microsoft Word, we encourage you to strip out the formatting using this button up here, the Remove Format button. That helps strip out formatting that Word or other websites kind of inject and make sure that everything looks and feels the same with the same header types and formatting that we use on our Konveio by default in our default style sheet. You would use this to add links to this if you like, using this editor. You can add pictures in here. You can use the default heading classes and things like that. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to style and format your content. And then if you remember, that header also has a background image, and so that's all hidden in the settings tab that each of those sections have. So you can easily change the background to an image, in which case you just upload an image. And if you don't want to mess with Photoshop to format those images, there's a couple of additional styles you can apply. They're called class. And you just sort of pick from this list. So in this case, we had picked a color overlay and a font color. And by choosing those things, the text will then show up as white with a color background over that image, as you can tell, whereas other sections that don't have those settings show up with the white background. The next thing we're going to look at here is the next section type is a block grid. So in this case, we have two blocks in this grid. One is called poster board 1, one is called poster board 2. You can easily add to that and add additional blocks in here. You can go in the settings tab and change the number of blocks per row. So you could make it 3 items side by side, after which it will break into the next line. Again, you could give this a background, which works exactly the same way as the main background that we just looked at. You could give this other classes if you like. So all of that's fairly self-explanatory, and I encourage you to try this out and play with it. One additional thing I want to highlight, you probably noticed the buttons in this case were red. So looking at this, there were some red buttons that in this case don't link anywhere, but we'll have to kind of set that up once we have our first document. But you can basically highlight this, add the link, and update this with your document URL that you create, and then from the drop down, when you highlight a link, you'll see 2 options. There's a general button style and a button style that we encourage you to use for documents that has a little bookmark icon on it to highlight that. So going further through this, all of this pretty much works the exact same way. You don't have to use icons if you structure this. So this is kind of the live streaming example. You could plug in your YouTube live stream in here, and embed code. If you use embed codes, just switch to the rich text editor, highlight the HTML in here, and just paste your YouTube embed code into this. And then looking at the bottom of this, this is where you add additional blocks. So you could add, for example, an image slider, or in this case, let's add a form real quick and see what that looks like. So we're going to use a form that's already on this site. I'm going to call this general feedback. Type in the first couple letters of the form that you already have created. And then we're going to make this stand out a little bit. So we're going to make this a color background. Choose a very light background so we don't have to change the font color. And we're going to try something new. So there's some, the first couple of ones are all sort of related to the font on those overlays. The background we already talked about. Then there's a couple of items in here that allow you to build boxes with rounded corners to call out items, and then you can kind of adjust the spacing. If it looks off, you can reduce the spacing and padding around it by clicking any of these categories. So in this case, I'm just going to make this rounded corners and click Save to kind of take a look at what this looks like. And so now when we scroll to the bottom of this form, we see there's a form with a rounded corner background, a couple of additional fields that this form already has, and yeah, and that's about it. The last few things I want to highlight here on the overview pages is a simple way to rearrange everything. So as you add more sections, the need may arise to rearrange them. So you can collapse them all, and at that point you can use that drag handle to kind of resort how they're displayed, move them into different places. The other thing here that I mentioned earlier is you can use the password protection to set a password for, let's say, a small stakeholder group that you want this page to be limited at. Maybe that's their workspace that captures all the upcoming events and a few different documents to collaborate on. So put in a password that acts like a token, so you would send that same password to the whole group along with the URL that you copy from the top. And saving that will give you a quick idea. Actually, I had already set this up earlier, so it's still unlocked. But if we open this in a new window, you will see that this page now is password protected. Once I type in 123, it becomes available, and every place that you share that password also becomes available and unlocked. So that's an interesting combination to kind of just sort of highlight different spaces for a specific group, meaning anything on this page, like the poster boards, you would then go in and protect those poster boards with the same password, and that way it's easy to keep those together. So let's move on and look at the forms. We already kind of referenced the form, so let's look at the form that is in here. You would go back to the dashboard, click on the Forms tab, and we have the existing form that we just looked at. So it has a couple of different fields, like a text field, text area, multiple, or a checkbox list to check your favorite fruit, and a ranking question where you can drag and drop things into a specific ranking order. Clicking on the Web Form tab or on the Edit tab from the dashboard, you'll see there's already a certain amount of questions in here. The easiest way to get in is to just sort of kind of look at what these look like, so you can kind of see the name field as a simple text area. You kind of give it a label, a quick description. You can make it required. A placeholder. Description is basically what shows up in the help text in that little flyout. The placeholder is something that goes away after you click into the field and override it. So those are the common fields. Like a lot of the other ones are really sort of just for specific uses. And so you can kind of build those out fairly easily. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but let's look at the select list option. The select list basically is both for checkboxes, meaning pick one, as well as pick multiple. The options have to put in a unique way where it's basically following the structure down here, a safe key followed by a readable option. So it's be 1 apples, 2 bananas, with this separator in between. And then you can make it a multi-select list by checking this, or you could wrap it all into a drop-down, checking that list box field. And using that, let's go back here and take a look at this. So now we actually have multi-select, and you can just check any that apply. Going back to this page, there's a range of other options you have. So for example, we have a map field that you can add, a date field, an email field that kind of checks that it really is input the correct way. You can have a 5-star rating in here. Markup is what you would use if you want to plug in some additional content. For example, a video that people should respond to, or it's just some instructions. And the other ones we kind of already talked about. So I encourage you to play with all those and experiment with them. We also have a full help article on how to create those in our help section when you click on help up here. And one additional thing I want to quickly highlight for forms. So when you click on here, we have a field that's other in here, and you can see when you check this, a text field comes out where you can type in what that other should be like. And so to set this up, you can see we have a text field defined that just doesn't show up by default. And then we're using conditionals to set that up. And the conditionals basically allows you to create if this then that kind of statements. So you can say if the answer to this question is other, then this specific field is shown, and it gives you a selection of all the different question types that are in there. So you can build your own kind of tree structure for surveys and skip people ahead that, depending on their answers. To round this out, you can send yourself email responses. So you can type in your email address and send, parts or all of the responses to yourself in case this is a contact form, for example. If you do collect an email address from the users in your form, you could even use that to email them an email confirmation. So that's all under the email tab. And then moving forward on the settings tab, there's just some details for the form. You could change the submission setting or the confirmation message. You could direct people in a different direction, meaning you could redirect them to a specific thank you page you're creating or a next step if it's a multi-step kind of environment you're building, or just simply reload the same page. I'd encourage you to keep the submissions open and don't limit people. Limiting users to one per user doesn't work all that well because one, people can delete the cookie. The other thing is if you're restricted by IP address, it's it's very restrictive for people working from the same place. So we kind of encourage you to keep that unlimited. You can change the setting in here and make it so that only users that have created a user account can submit this form. If you keep this checked, then even people that are not logged in can submit it. And under advanced, you can change the submit button label and a couple of other settings. So we'll save this, and of course you want to get the results out afterwards. So there's a results tab to click on for each of the surveys that shows you what's been submitted. You can look at the analysis tab, which shows you charts for all the different submissions that have come through. For anything that's quantifiable, I should say, you could kind of change this to, for example, a pie chart, and make this look a little different depending on your needs. You can generate a report from that as a PDF document, and then obviously you can download everything. So you can download it to CSV or to Excel spreadsheets. So from here, we're going to move forward to the last big part of this walkthrough, which is the documents. So again, from the Documents tab, you have access to add new documents. You can see the documents that are already in Konveio and are already created. You can unpublish them if you're still working on them. You can edit all of them, delete them. And we're going to just look at one existing document to kind of dissect how it all works. As you can see on top of the document, you have a few different choices or different things that are happening here. So you have a guided tour that kind of walks people through different steps of the document. We have these pins that are overlaid that show us additional content, like instructions and things like that. We have comments, and we'll go over how to how to set up comments and how to submit comments. But let's start with the overlays. So overlays are a great way to add additional content into your document. And you can modify existing ones. You can kind of move them around. You can edit them. So as you go in here, you see that they have a title, a quick icon, that you can either upload yourself or grab from a website that we link here and just type in the short handle that you look up in the website. And then you can reference different things. So in this case, it references a web form. Adding new pins is pretty simple. So you just click on the Add Pins and go from comment mode to adding pins mode. In this case, you see your cursor has a gray icon that allows you to either add a pin right in here into the document, or you can just do that on the sidebar. So let's just make this a new one that is a general feedback icon in the sidebar. We're going to add a link here. So let's assume I already looked this up. This is FA question, which is the symbol for a question mark. And again, this is the reference where you kind of get those from. You can choose which pages that should show up. So this document is 2 pages long, and so we could say from page 1 to 2, so across the whole document, which is a nice thing about the sidebar. So you can put in items that should be shown across the whole document, and then you can add additional information in here, or we could, for example, pick a web form that's already in here. You can add an embed code, which is something like a mapping tool or something like that, and link either within the document or to some other part of the document, or outside links. And for YouTube, we even allow you to just sort of plug in the YouTube ID into this field, which shows the video. But let's go with the general feedback form and just call this, I guess we should make this a call to action, so it would be provide general feedback. We could add an identifier, which basically saves, actually I was wrong here. This should be the name of your form that you're referencing, not the title. And so basically, you know, as you type, you'll see a list pop down with the surveys that are already created. This site only has one, so we're just going to pick this general feedback form. And we're going to set a location identifier, so this would be maybe sidebar, so we know that this submission was made in the sidebar in case we want to reuse that form across different places in multiple parts of the survey. I click Save, and as you expect, we have like a new icon. It flies out and says general feedback, and then the form that we just talked about and created and modified kind of shows up in this pop-up. So moving forward from the pins, the next thing we'll look at are the comments. So as you click anywhere, oh, still in pin mode, adding pin mode, so I want to switch back to commenting mode. Anywhere I click, I can see that I can add a comment. I'm already logged in, so it doesn't ask me for a user and email name or to ask me to log in and register. You can see there's a drop-down that has a couple of different options in here. And we'll go over these a little bit later, how to modify them. But basically, there's some general ones, and there's some that are only visible to me right now because I'm an admin. So we've already created an official response, which is sort of the type you would use if you want to track comments in your document. But let's just make this a suggestion. Type in a quick comment and add it. So in this case, you know, the comment shows up. It's highlighted that it's submitted by an admin up here. People can reply to that. You notice there are some comments that stand out further. So admins have the option to add highlighted comments, which gives you a more visible type of comment icon and gives you the option to add guiding questions for things that you really want to learn about from people. And then everything related to those comments can be managed and modified on the comments tab. So everything that comes in, you can kind of easily see in here. You can make sense of this all in sort of a qualitative analysis style using these tags with your teammates that have access to this. So you could either use existing ones. So as you type in here, things that are already in here will show up. New ones will simply be created, and you hit enter and they show up. You can save this, and now you can basically use this to filter by all the comments by a specific tag and create sort of specific reports based on that. This is also the interface where you would go and unpublish comments if they're inappropriate or remove them, but be careful with the removal because those would be lost and should be done for maybe demo comments or things that need to be removed, but not for be careful with sort of deleting people's actual comments without keeping a reference copy for those. And then for comments also, you can go to the reports tab. You get an overview sort of at a glance of how many comments were submitted within each question type or within each category or tag that you created and how they break down. And then also a sentiment analysis that kind of scores all the comments using Google's natural language processing. So just a great way to kind of get some overview, even though you'll notice in detail they might not be as accurate because it's obviously sort of a robot judging them. And obviously you want to get the reports out of this system, so you can generate a PDF report which will give you the pages with anchor links in them, little identifiers and numbers to make sure you can reference all the documents, and then they have the comments injected into it. Or you can choose the CSV route, which will give you all the comments in a spreadsheet format, but again, they have anchor links that bring you back to the website, or the little identifiers that allow you to see what they were about. Looking at this document and going a little bit further into the details of how to set this up. So on the Edit tab, this would be the same for a new document you create. You put in a title, a short call to action, maybe a description that shows up on top. You would upload the PDF in here. You can upload multiple PDFs, which is great if you want a chapter by chapter navigation, Or, and that's the other thing here, is like we limit the file size to 25 megabytes because a lot of this gets sent, or the files get sent to the client where they get translated into HTML. So there's a lot of content that gets sent, and so we offer instructions here on how to save your PDF in the smallest possible optimized version. It's a simple tweak in Adobe Acrobat in the format how you save them. If that still doesn't bring it below the 25 megabytes, again, you can use different chapters, and you could basically then type in chapter titles that show up in the drop-down that gets added for each of them. You can upload a thumbnail for the home page. You can set a specific comment period end, or you can just go to the comment settings in here and close it manually. You can also turn the comments completely off and setting this to hidden, which is great for example, if you have a final document where you don't want any more comments, you can just sort of turn this off. This is where you set, by default, the site is set to have people register a user account. If they want to participate and submit comments, you can overwrite this in here for each document and say for specific documents it should be open where they don't have to register a user account. You can hide some of those comment types if they don't apply for a certain comment or document. And you can also tweak the official instructions in here. So when you go back, we have the instructions up here. Again, those can be changed in the guided tour we're going to look at too. You can kind of modify that. All that is towards the end of this document page. So comment settings gives you the option to overwrite and make changes to the instructions. The step-by-step guide gives you basically an idea, an interface to build out this sort of step-by-step, using different pages as reference points for where to jump. You can even jump people between different documents if you have multiple documents uploaded. And then the last thing I want to highlight real quick is the document password. So again, if you can lock down a specific password document with a shared password token, in which case, again, you send the URL to that document and the token to anybody who should have access to that. They'll have to put that in first, and then they will see the document and be able to participate. If that's what you have in mind, you can basically also hide this from the home page, since it's only a smaller group that should have access. In this case, it doesn't show up in the list on the home page. So that's a great way to kind of, make this a stakeholder group specific kind of document. Going back here, let's assume this is the poster board that we created. The last part of this overview, I want to kind of tell you sort of how to connect the different pieces. We already know how to embed the forms into both the document or the overview page. But let's say you wanted to grab this poster board and add that to your overview. Let's go back to our the digital workshop that we created. So up until now, those links in the poster boards are empty. So basically, we copied the URL of that specific document. We would go in here, wait until this editor launches, go back to the blocks, highlight this or double-click this link, and then just paste our document title in here. Click OK. In this case, maybe let's style it differently and say this is actually a document button, and then save this. And so after saving, if we go back here, you see the document, the button kind of changed. It now links to the specific document, so people that are going through and coming from your overview page can now easily go here. They can participate, leave their feedback. What's still missing is a link back to the overview page. So when we go back into the settings down here, you can check a few different links. You could either add this to the main menu, which is the menu up here, but in this case we just want to add a backlink. So we can, change this and say back to a digital workshop. This is a reference field that again lets you search. So anything you start typing, the title of the page that you created, you would select in here. You click save, and now you see there's a link to the top, on the top that says back to digital workshop. When you click that, you go back to here. And again, this is sort of a nice way to kind of tie it all together for people to explore these and come back to the main one and then navigate to something else. An additional thing I want to highlight is now that we're here, I want to highlight that the default homepage does only show documents at this point. We're working on this, so that'll change likely soon. But for now, to give people access to these landing pages, you would add a link to the main navigation. So scrolling to the bottom of this, let's go to the menu settings. Let's check this link so that it displays a menu link. It automatically takes the page title, and you can change that if you don't like this as the link title. Site menu is that main menu on the top. The weight basically allows you to rearrange it, but I'm going to show you a quicker way of doing that in just a second here. So you click Save, and you see now this is referenced on the top in this top menu. And you also see that this main menu can be easily edited using this gear icon up here. You just click on List Links, and then you see there's currently 2 that are up here. You can rearrange them, you can make changes to them in here. You could add additional ones, so like this would be back to our project website or something like that. So let's just go back to Google in this case, and click Save. So you'll see this shows up as an additional link. You could rearrange those in here and move them around to kind of make them look and feel the way that you want. You can also make them nested and add drop-downs easily. So if you see this indentation, basically indicates this is now a drop-down icon on this main menu. So very easy to kind of add and rearrange this whole navigation. And further, as I mentioned, if in some cases this default homepage just doesn't cut it. So a good way to restructure this, let's say this digital workshop should be our homepage. In this case, we're just copying everything after that first / and go back to the dashboard, and under settings, you will find under advanced, you will find, we already talked about this earlier, but there's a default front page, and you can basically change it to a different URL handle. And if we save it this way, the homepage link now goes to the specific page. So it's an easy way to create sort of a custom homepage if you choose to do so. One final thing I want to look at, because we skipped over that earlier, but now that we've kind of looked more in depth into comments, this is also where you would change some of the default comment settings. You could change the default setting for it to be open. For in this case, if you change it, all documents will not require logins. If you do want that sort of case-by-case decision, keep this checked and enable it on the document side. So that's the easier route to go. If you choose to give people the option to not register, you could also give them the option to not add in a username and email address. Keep in mind, though, then a lot of the comments will have the label anonymous and will be all merged together, so you don't know how many different people submitted them. So use this with caution. The comment types is a simple way to, again, restructure, add additional comment types that people can use to self-categorize. This is also where you would select the ones that are only available to managers for things like answers, official responses. You can rename, delete them in here. Be careful with that if they already have, certain comments labeled with them. Obviously, sort of it would remove that from those comments. And then the tags can be managed from in here too. So you see the ones that are already in here. You could go and rename them if you change your mind later on, and add additional ones, even though you can do that on the other interface also. Comment visibility, just to round this out, is you could choose to not show people comments, so that in this case they could only see their own comments. Use that with caution again, because 1, you'll get a lot more duplicates. 2, this is a site-wide setting, so it overrides everything. And we find that it's a lot more productive if you allow people to see their comments, but we understand that there's sort of sensitive comment or projects where that might be a necessity. Yeah, with that, keep in mind, if this is obviously just meant as a quick and brief overview. We're assuming there's probably still going to be questions afterwards, so feel free to reach out to us using this support form. That's the quickest way to get answers to your questions. And then we also have this help tab up here that gives you access to our section, help desk with tutorials, frequently asked questions and answers to those. for anything from how to build surveys and to how to add things to specific items to pins like zoomable images and things like that.